So very quickly, Father Hidalgo, who is the leader of this independence movement, with Ignacio Allende being the second in charge, you're going to see them bring together a large army very quickly. And this army is mostly made up of indigenous peoples, right, who lived in various villages in the area, as well as mixed race people or castas, and workers also were heavily involved in this independence army. Okay, workers because of the poor conditions that they were experiencing at their jobs, very open to joining this independence movement. So you have a number of workers, indigenous peoples, all joining together to fight for independence. Now, they didn't have the best weaponry. Okay, it's not like everybody had a gun or they had a lot of cannons. Eventually, they'll get better weaponry, but at first, really, they just have basic weapons, right? Not a lot of gunpowder weapons. They got bows and arrows, slings where they could throw rocks at you, machetes, clubs. This is really basic low-tech weaponry that they're using. But what they do have, what this army does have, is the numbers, right? There's going to be thousands of individuals who will join this army. And so with their numbers, they're going to be successful in taking over a number of towns. Now, the first town that they're going to go to is San Miguel. And they're going to easily take over San Miguel. But once they take control of the town, they don't stop there. No, the army is going to loot the town. They're going to steal a number of goods. They're going to be attacking a number of Spaniards, because remember, death to Spaniards is one of the rallying cries for this independence movement. And so you're going to have a number of Spaniards being attacked as well. And pretty much it's chaos going on in the town of San Miguel. And Father Hidalgo, who is the leader of the army, cannot stop the looting. He can't stop his army from destroying the town of San Miguel. And so that is a major issue. The army is going to move on from San Miguel to Celaya, another town, and again, the army is acting unruly. They cannot be controlled. They are going wild. They are stealing. They are attacking people. The town is being destroyed. And so Hidalgo is having a really hard time controlling this army of his, even though he is the leader. It takes the military man, Ignacio Allende, to finally stop the looting of this unruly army. Now, from Celaya, the army is going to move on to the mining town of Guanajuato. And here, the army is going to face a challenge. Because before, the first towns at San Miguel and Celaya, the army was not really challenged at all. They easily took over the towns and they began looting the area. But as the army approaches Guanajuato, the local intendant, you remember we were talking about that political position, the intendants. The local intendant, Juan Antonio de Riaño, he is somewhat prepared for the army. He heard about what is going on in San Miguel and Celaya. He knows that the army is on their way. And so Riaño is going to prepare the best he could. He's going to take all the local people and they are going to hold themselves up in the public granary. Their plan is to go into the public granary and try to hold off the army for as long as they can, because they have weaponry, right? They have guns, and they could shoot down the army, and hopefully they can keep them out of the public granary until more troops can arrive from Mexico City to stop Hidalgo's army. Okay, and so that's what Riaño is thinking. Hidalgo had reached out to Riaño ahead of time, and he asked him to peacefully give up the town of Guanajuato. But Riaño refused because he had heard about the looting and the violence that was going on because of the unruly army. And so that's why he took everybody into the public granary so that they could try to hold out until more troops could arrive from Mexico City. So when Hidalgo and his army arrive in Guanajuato, they are going to begin to approach the public granary. But as the army starts to approach, Riaño and his men will begin to open fire. And they're going to kill a large number of individuals that are fighting in Hidalgo's army. Right? You'll have hundreds of individuals getting shot. And so for a while, Riaño is holding out there in the public granary in Guanajuato. But eventually, the army is going to break their way into the public granary. They're going to set the gates on fire. And after the gate starts to burn down, you're going to have a number of individuals in Hidalgo's army break through, and they're going to run into the granary, and they're going to begin slaughtering Riaño and all of the people that are there in the public granary. So it's a massacre. Yes, a massacre occurs there. A number of people of Spanish descent, the Spaniards that are there in the granary, are murdered. They are stripped naked. They're dragged out of the granary and then are buried unceremoniously. And so this is a victory for Hidalgo's army right there at Guanajuato. From Guanajuato, you're going to have Hidalgo moving closer to Mexico City. And outside of Mexico City, you're going to have the Battle of Monte de las Cruces. And this is a hard-fought battle. The Spanish soldiers are more trained and they have better weaponry, but Hidalgo's army has the numerical advantage. There are a lot more individuals in Hidalgo's army, and so even though many will die because of the Spanish army's weaponry, they're ultimately going to be able to overwhelm the Spanish forces, and the Spaniards will be forced to retreat back into Mexico City. So the Battle of Monte de las Cruces is going to be another victory for Hidalgo's army. So at this point, it looks like the independence movement is very successful. Right? They've taken a number of towns, and now they're on the verge of taking Mexico City. And once you take Mexico City, that's pretty much it. They're going to be able to gain independence from the Spanish Empire, right? So close to victory. But there is a problem here. Father Hidalgo is hesitant to attack Mexico City. Instead, he and his army are going to wait outside of Mexico City for a period of time, and eventually he's going to decide not to go further into Mexico City to finalize his victory. Instead, he is going to retreat and move north into Guadalajara. Okay, so why? Why was Hidalgo so hesitant to attack Mexico City at this time? The victory was right there in his hands. But there were a number of reasons why Father Hidalgo was hesitant to lead his army into Mexico City. For one, he lost a lot of men at the battle at Monte de las Cruces. It was a hard-fought victory for Hidalgo's army. Why? Because, yes, the Spanish soldiers had superior weaponry, and they were a more well-trained army. Right? So Hidalgo lost a lot of men in that battle. Also, he was low on resources. Right? He didn't have enough ammunition, and so if he went into Mexico City, it was possible that he would have been defeated by the Spanish forces. And finally, Hidalgo was hesitant because he did not want to unleash his unruly army on the capital of Mexico City, because he saw what the army had done in the earlier towns that they had taken over, right? It was destruction. You have property being destroyed, stolen, people being killed. And so basically he felt that Mexico City would have been destroyed if his army had been victorious and defeated the Spanish forces there in Mexico City. So ultimately, for those three reasons, Hidalgo decided to retreat north to Guadalajara. We could take a look at the map here. So from Mexico City, you're going to have Hidalgo and his army moving into the north, into Guadalajara, where they would easily take over the region. The area did not put up much of a fight at all. But this was ultimately a mistake. If Hidalgo would have entered into Mexico City, he would have had a much better chance at defeating the Spanish forces. Instead, because he decided to retreat into Guadalajara, this gave the Spanish military the chance to regroup, and eventually they would follow after Hidalgo's army. Now, as Father Hidalgo and his army headed north, there was a problem with desertion, meaning that a number of the soldiers that were fighting in his army decided to desert the army. They left. They didn't want to fight anymore, and so his numbers started to dwindle down. At the same time, the Spanish forces, who were under the leadership of General Felix Calleja, started to organize, and eventually they encountered Hidalgo's army, and they were able to gain a victory. In fact, they routed the rebel army. A rout is basically when you defeat the opposing army and it gets to the point where they have to do an unorganized retreat. Okay, there's a difference between an organized retreat and a wild, undisciplined retreat where people are just scattering and running off in different directions. So that's a rout. And Hidalgo's army was routed by General Calleja. Okay, and so this is one of the first major losses for Hidalgo's army. And so after this loss, Hidalgo and the rest of the leadership of the independence movement are going to head north towards the United States. They're not going to go into the U.S., but they're going to go into the area of Coahuila, and they're trying to make it up into Texas. They feel that they would be safe there. But the problem is, as they get into the area of Coahuila, we can take a look at a map here, show you where that is. Here's Coahuila right here. Here's Texas. As Hidalgo's army makes their way into Coahuila, they are going to be attacked. There's going to be a surprise attack on them by Spanish forces, and ultimately, Father Hidalgo, Ignacio Allende, and other members of the army, the leadership, are going to be captured there in Coahuila. And so a number of rebel leaders are captured. Ignacio Allende is going to be executed along with other civilian members of the rebel army. But Father Hidalgo is not going to be executed immediately like the others were because he's a priest. And when you're a priest, you have special courts set up for members of the clergy. And so Hidalgo would go to an ecclesiastical court first. He was found guilty, and then he was given over to the secular authorities afterwards. And then, finally, Father Hidalgo was executed. His head was chopped off. It was put on a pole for everybody to see to try to discourage other individuals from fighting for independence from Spain. But it didn't work. Because still, even though Father Hidalgo and Ignacio Allende were killed and executed by the Spanish forces, the independence movement still raged on. There were a number of different guerrilla groups that were fighting in various parts of the country, such as in Oaxaca and the area of the mountains of Veracruz and Puebla. They were still fighting against Spanish forces, even though Hidalgo was murdered. So yes, it was a big loss. It was definitely a big blow to the movement, losing Father Hidalgo, but the independence movement did not stop there.